our history. Buildings and people and memories and dreams. Who better to tell us than those who were there? There's so much to learn from the stories they'll share. Living history. Living history.
Hello, and welcome to Living History with Ted Goldsborough. Today we're welcoming back Max Buten. Welcome, Max. Thanks for coming. Max grew up in Merion, and the last time we talked about his family history in Russia, the family paint business, the Buten Paint Company, and the house he grew up in on North Bowman Avenue in Merion.
Now, when you were in that house, you went to where for junior high and high school?
I went to Kinwood School, started in 4th grade.
How did you get to school?
I walked. I walked to Kinwood School, which was about as far as my kids my house is from Penn Valley School where my kids went, but they never walked. It was, I don't know why, out of style. There are no sidewalks, too far, other stories, but we certainly walked. All the time I was at Kinwood School was World War II. So one of the reasons why we walked was that there was no gasoline to be had for transporting school children. There were some, no, I don't know if there was anybody that was bused to Kinwood School. Nobody was bused to Narber School where you went, I'm sure.
We walked.
Everybody walked. Then, starting in 1944, I was at Kinwood School, Kinwood Junior High, and I walked there too. Because of the war, there were not enough buses to handle both Lower Merion and two junior highs. So Kinwood Junior High started at 9:30 and ran until 4:30 in the afternoon. It was a long and late day, especially compared to Kinwood School, which had an hour and a half break for lunch. So I often went home for lunch. In junior high, I took a prize in mathematics and another one in printing, and I tied for the prize in electrical shop. So I did pretty well scholastically there. I also won the spelling bee, and I wanted to bring my medal or maybe even wear it, but now I can't find it. It's a good solid medal. I don't know how it could have disappeared. So on to Lower Merion, where I was also a good student and managed the baseball team for all 3 years, just to be one of the sporting crowd. And here is my yearbook picture. I graduated in 1950. Speaking wisely, thinking much, it says, which is pretty nice, I guess. But at Lower Merion, at that time they were redoing Lower Merion, building the cafeteria in the back, which is now to be, I'm sure right now, being demolished. And so they moved the athletics off of Pennypacker Field behind the school. They moved across the street to Arnold Field. And for a while I had a job working for one of the newspapers. I would call them in immediately after the game, call them and give them the score, and I guess tell them who scored or whatever, and they would publish that information in the next day's paper, Sunday's paper, and I would get maybe $5 for that. It was a nice job, and I got to stand on the sidelines at the football game. It was good.
You're a member of the press.
I was.
Max, in the 1941 Bowman Avenue, you had something special in your garage.
Oh boy, did we ever. It was shortly after my grandmother died, and so we had her car and my father's car in the garage at the same time. It was a 3-car garage, so there was space left over, but we had 2 red Packards, probably 1939 vintage. Wouldn't you like to have them, Ted?
Now tell me about Packards. What were they?
Packard was, I think, one step above Cadillacs in that time. Very nice big car. We sat in the back with a lap robe on our laps and were driven about. My grandmother, of course, didn't drive. She had a chauffeur. One day he was not available, so this must have been while we were still in Winfield. So they sent me in town to take my music lesson, my piano lesson, by myself. Gave me a whole pocket full of change to use on the trolley. And I took the trolley down 54th Street to 52nd and Spruce, transferred to the 42 trolley to go in town. I was supposed to get off at 16th and Chestnut, but I heard Chestnut at 33rd, and I got off there and walked the rest of the way, which was hard because I had so much change in my pocket. I was like, well, I wasn't. So eventually I got there. To much consternation. Why was I an hour late? Was I still alive? Everybody was very upset and worried.
How old were you then?
Well, I was like 8.
Woo! How'd you know which way to go?
Well, I'd gone that way many times before with my mother. It wasn't a new route.
Why didn't you get back on the trolley again? Didn't think about it. Okay.
I don't know. So
Oh.
it was maybe because of that, no, I don't know why, that I cannot play the piano despite taking lessons for several years.
Did your grandmother, whose car that was in the garage, did she live with your family on Bowman Avenue?
No, she lived on Osage Avenue in West Philadelphia in one of the, well, she had the end house in the row. Next to her was her daughter, Annie, and her husband. Earlier, a couple uncles had been across the street or around that neighborhood somewhere. But much later, that was the block that the MOVE people were in, and that the mayor then said, okay, drop a bomb on them and scare them out, and the result was that the whole block burned down.
Including your home?
Including my grandmother's home.
Wow. That was around 63rd?
Yes, that was
6262nd
block. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. In our childhood, you had things delivered.
Yes. We had milk delivered. The house was built with a little closet in the wall, so you put with doors on both sides, so the milkman put the milk in the closet, and when we got up we would open the other door and bring it in and put it in the refrigerator. Seems to me that we got so much milk that it didn't all fit. Of course, these were in glass quart bottles. I remember one time when the milk actually did freeze and the the lid cream popped up the top and made a cap, like a hat on the milk. At some point in the 40s, homogenized milk was invented, so that the cream was no longer separate on the top, so that you had to shake it every time you got it. The first year or the first months, it didn't work right, and you would shake it, and it still wouldn't come back together. And then Freihofer's also came with bread. We had a man working for us who was there at lunchtime, and he had lunch which included like 6 slices of white bread.
Gosh.
Which was just a very strange diet, I thought, for a number of reasons. What else? It was kosher house, so we still used the same butcher, I think, who was at near 54th and City Line on 54th Street. I don't know if my mother went there on the bus or what. To go in town from Merion, I would take the Ardmore via Narberth bus, which is now the 44, which went down Montgomery Avenue from Ardmore, past our house on Bowman Avenue, and down Bryn Mawr Avenue to City Line, out City Line to 69th Street Terminal. And from there, I could take the subway, the Market Street subway in town. So I did that later.
You stayed at Harzion Temple, or your family did, in Winfield, even though after you had moved to Bowman Avenue. Were there temples you could have gone to in Lower Merion at that time?
No. There were not any synagogues in Lower Merion, so I continued to go to Harzion, to Hebrew school, again taking the bus, walk from school, from junior high to Montgomery Avenue, take the bus to City Line, then take the trolley to Harzion Temple, which is only 4 or 5 blocks into Winfield. And I got there in the middle of the class. It had long started. So I went there. I know I went there in 1945 because I remember that one night on the way home, the headline in the newspaper, and they were newsboys selling papers on the street, was that Roosevelt had died. And that was in, I believe, April 1945. Then in, what was it, a year or so later, a year later, I was bar mitzvahed at Harzion. So I went there to get lessons in my portion of the Torah that I was to say. And a couple weeks before my bar mitzvah, I got chicken pox. So I was home scratching my head from the poxes. Is that what they are?
Pox.
Whatever.
Scabs.
Whatever the scabs.
Yeah.
I guess they are. And I never did learn the end of all that I was supposed to learn, but I got through it anyhow. And I got such neat things for presents. I got boxing gloves, which I think I got football pads. I got a nice long keychain so I could be a zoot suiter. And I got a Reynolds ballpoint pen. You're too young to know what that was.
Yeah, they were the beginning of ballpoint pens.
The first ballpoint pen. Yep.
Yeah.
Fountain pens are much older.
48, class of...
46.
46?
This was 45. December 45, I was bar mitzvah.
You mentioned Boy Scouts on Parsons Avenue.
Yes.
Could you tell me about that?
Yeah. Sometime along the way, I joined the Boy Scouts. There was a troop Bala 3 that was aided, given space by the Bala Kenwood Methodist Church in an old house, an empty house on Parsons Avenue, which has since been torn down. I think it was where the parking lot is across the street from Jaime's and so forth. So we met there every week. The highlight of it, well, a couple of highlights of it for me was, one of them was the cracker eating contest. Give each of us a box, well, not a box, but a packet of saltines, and whoever could eat it first and then whistle was the winner. Well, I was very good at eating. There were a lot of things I was not good at, not anything athletic. So I was easily the first one, and I was whistling before they were halfway finished. So, other than the spelling bee, that was about the only contest I ever won. Then one time we went for a hike into Penn Valley, and even all the way up into Gladwin and back down again. We walked down a dirt road that went past the Fairview School, and that happens to be where I live, on Fairview Road. So I've been back down that road many times, but never again have I walked all the way down, and never again in the dirt.
You mentioned a 12-mile hike, and I was reminded about 12 and twos. Don't you have some coincidences with you and your family?
Yeah, my birthday, as you can see here, is on 12/12, and according to my father, there was 12 inches of snow on the ground that day. So, yes, there are plenty of 12s. And then a 12-mile hike was a requirement to get a first-class Boy Scout rank badge. It was a tough walk for me, I'll tell you. We took the trolley out. Well, we went to 69th Street on the Ardmore-Narberth bus, and then took the trolley out halfway to Westchester. We went to whatever that town is now, halfway out, and walked from there. Walked through the country, and we walked through up and down, and finally got to Ardmore, and I was ready to take the bus home and cheat. My friend Alan said, no, you got to walk all the way, and I got home exhausted.
Wow. How did you sometimes get to Lower Merion High School?
I don't know how I was supposed to get there. I guess there was a bus somewhere, but I would go down to Montgomery Avenue and hitchhike to school. I'm not sure why, whether I was too déclassé to ride the school bus, or the bus got there too late, or I have no idea why. Once I got a ride in a day like today, wintry day, in an open car of some sort of Army surplus car, and rode 3 miles to Lower Merion. Boy, was I cold. The people that were driving it, they had nice heavy coats, I didn't. So yeah, I hitchhiked in all sorts of ways. It was not as bad as hitchhiking when I was in the Army in Alabama, where I actually did get a ride with somebody who would reach into the glove compartment every so often and take out a pint and take a swig of it. That worried me.
Could you tell about hitchhiking? You don't see that much anymore. What was that?
Well, to hitchhike, you went out on the highway and stuck out your thumb like this, meaning I'd like a ride, and maybe you'd go like make some motions, and sometimes it worked, and much more often it didn't work. You had to wait sometimes a long time. There's a wonderful movie in which our hero is out hitchhiking, and his girlfriend, who's with him, he's not getting a ride, so she just stands there with her skirt pulled up a little so that you can see her nice legs, and the car screeches to a halt and picks her up. Well, I never had that help.
Yeah, right. Now, after Lower Merion, you went to the University of Lower Merion. Where was that?
Its real name is University of Pennsylvania. There were 17 people in our class that went to Lower Merion. So 3 of them were chemical engineers in a class of about a dozen. One of the chemical engineers was me. I was very primed for Lower Merion, for Penn. Everybody said it was going to be tough in engineering school, and it was. If nothing else, it was 30 hours of class and 34 hours of class every week. But it started with Chem 101, not Chem 1, which in those days was the class that kids in the regular college took, but the engineering level, Chem 101. And I was so primed with that I studied all the time and got an A, which resulted in a nice letter to Lower Merion, to my chemistry teacher. One of the days I was staying, this was the fall of 1950, when I was studying at a house where the GSB building is now. And we were listening to the Phillies play, either in the World Series, or maybe that was the year where they never made it to the World Series and lost. Yeah, they lost 10 out of 12 games at the end of the season and didn't make it. But I was listening to the depressing World Series and studying away, which was depressing. Not a nice afternoon. But after my freshman year, I joined a fraternity and was not such a good student at all. I did a lot of traveling and with my friends and fraternity brothers, and not enough studying.
I thought it was interesting about Judaism. I mean, we had Jewish families like the Ricklands family and the Harrison family, old time in Lower Merion, but in the 1950s, wasn't there more Jewish families moving into Lower Merion?
Yeah, we moved in 1941, but then after the war, what they said was, Merion, Merion, where all the rich Jews are scurrying. I'm not sure who said that then, but it was more or less true. There were many moving out of Winfield into Merion, and I guess some further out. And there was a synagogue, which I think had been founded in the 30s. It was then in a tiny little building in Haverford on Lancaster Avenue that's still there, still as tiny as it ever was, and there were barely room for the 10 people that you needed to have a service. So on the high holidays, when many people went, they would have services either in Haverford College, or later Bryn Mawr College. Eventually in the 50s, we started having men come over to our house who were there for Sunday brunch and then would go out to raise money to build a new synagogue building. Eventually it got built. There's a picture of the groundbreaking for this synagogue. The rabbi on one end, my father on the other, George Friedland in the middle, and a couple of Boy Scouts and all sorts of arrangements at that time. The synagogue was promoted and to a large extent financed by George Friedland, who was here. He was the president of food fair stores, which I guess we should talk about too at a later on maybe. Here he is giving an award to my father, and my mother is in the middle. My father was very active in the synagogue. He was on the board, and as I said before, he sang in the choir for many years. My mother was also active. She was president of the sisterhood, and here is a picture with my mother middle in the front row of all the board members, I guess, of the sisterhood. Don't you love their hats?
Yeah.
That's a winter picture. There's another picture taken outdoors in the summer where they're all wearing white hats that are just as big.
Were hats in vogue at that time?
Oh yes, especially for sisterhoods. And
Okay.
actually, there are meetings. There are pictures we have at the Historical Society of a political meeting in somebody's back lawn where all the women are wearing hats. Everyone. And a little less spectacular than those, though.
Did hats on females have anything to do with Judaism, or was it just the times?
Oh, no, it was just the times.
Okay.
Women, well, no, they were not wearing, many of them were wearing hats in synagogue services, and one of the things my father did when he was bored during the sermon, he would be up on the altar or next to it in the choir, and he would count the number of red hats. And after the service, he would give us a report of how many, only 20 today, or 35, or whatever.
Was in the public schools, I remember there was a lot of Christianity. You read the Bible. What else? I mean, how did Jews feel coming into a place where there were Christmas trees and people were wearing crosses and sang Christmas carols?
And you said the Lord's Prayer every day. Well, that was quite a shock. To come into school and say the Declaration of Independence, but then say the Lord's Prayer and read from the Bible. Well, I learned the Lord's Prayer, and it's something that I lived through and just sat through. I wasn't about to make a fuss and say anything about the separation of church and state, which people have since done. But it was just acceptable.
Max, I'm sorry, we're going to have to interrupt for a minute here. We're out of time for this edition of Living History, but we'll be sure to have you back again to talk more about your life and memories about Lower Merion. Thanks for joining us on Living History, and we'll see you next time with Ted Goldsboro. Bye.